If you own property in San Diego and you're planning any kind of construction project, there's a chance the city can legally require you to give them a portion of your land for free. It's called a dedication, and today we're going to break down exactly what this is and help you figure out whether or not it will apply to a project you're considering. So, Sean, to kick us off today, what exactly is a dedication when it comes to building projects in San Diego?
Okay, well, thanks for setting this up, Billy. A dedication is a condition of approval of a permit. And when we talk about dedications, we're specifically talking about land dedications. So, what happens is the city continuously changes their standards for street width, sidewalk width, alley width, and now with the addition of bike lanes, we add another variable into this. And when the city changes their standards, a lot of times they need more width in the street than the existing conditions allow. So rather than using eminent domain and taking everybody's, like the front of everybody's property, the way the city of San Diego has decided to handle this is as you apply for permits, the condition of approval of that permit is that you dedicate a certain amount of your property so that the city can now meet the standards. So here's a basic example. Let's say you're on a street that is 30 feet wide. The new standard is 40 feet wide. If you were to submit your permit, the city could ask for a dedication of 5 feet because you're going to dedicate five, and then in theory, the person across the street is going to dedicate another five, and then the city gets up to their new standard of 40 feet. So that's what a land dedication is.
Got it. And then what types of projects can trigger a dedication requirement? So would this just be major developments or really expensive custom homes, or could it even be the small ADU developer getting hit with this?
Well, the reason I wanted to do this podcast is because that's exactly the question that I've been trying to chase down an answer for. In 15 years, this has come up on two of our projects. Both of those projects have been discretionary permits. So you're certainly looking to do these types of things on discretionary permits. It's more common when you're on a busy street that generally is going to be planned to be wider, but it also could occur if you have a substandard alley. Like, for example, the current standard for an alley is 20 feet in width, but there's quite a lot of alleys out there that are 16 foot in width. So those projects would be subject to a dedication. The question that I have, and I've spent the last 2 weeks trying to get an answer for this from the Development Services Department, but it seems like nobody on staff is able to answer this question, is does an interior remodel trigger a dedication? Does an addition to a single family home trigger a dedication? Does an ADU trigger a dedication? Does an ADU bonus program project trigger a dedication? And does a new ground up dwelling unit trigger a dedication? And these things are not identified in the municipal code. But when I ask the building department, the answer we're met with is maybe. And the reason this is so important is because by the time you figure out that you could be required to do a dedication, you've already invested in your architect, your engineers, your permit facilitator. So you're about 40 grand, 50 grand into the project, depending on the scale of the project, by the time you will even figure out if the city is going to essentially extort you before they give you the permit for that little piece of land. And let me put this into perspective why this is important. The average property in San Diego is about $1 million. Let's say you have to dedicate the front 2 feet of your property. Well, on a standard size lot, that's going to translate to about 1.4, 1.5% of your square footage of your lot area. And on $1 million property, that's going to be about $14,000 to $15,000 of land value that you're giving away, plus the ability in the future, because the land appreciates, you're giving away the appreciative value and you're giving away the potential value to develop. So it's pretty significant.
Definitely, definitely. It's a borderline like mob tactic, quite honestly, the shakedown. But I know you have a bunch of documents you've pulled up ahead of time as you've researched this. Do you want to share your screen and take us through those now?
Yeah, so what I want to do here is I want to follow the city's step-by-step procedure to determine if a specific property, we'll use my office as an example, if that office would, if we were going to develop that, if it would trigger dedications, and then if it triggers dedications, what kind of dedication would be required. And I'll go through this with you here, Billy. Maybe we'll use you as an example to see if you could figure it out. and we'll see what we can come up with using the city's process. Okay, so first let me just give you an overview here. So they're giving us a 6-step process on this PDF. I'll zoom in on this, and basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through all 6 of these steps, and we're gonna see if we could figure this out. So first, let's take a example property. So I'll take my office. My office
All right,
is in.
the PDF is better designed than I was expecting, I will say, but I'm not
Well,
expecting much else.
hold that opinion until we figure out how this PDF works, because spoiler alert, but it may not provide the information it's advertising. Okay, so here's my office in North Park. This is 30th Street here. So this is kind of a prime area in North Park. And let's take a look at the width of this right of way. So when you're talking about the width of the right of way, you're going from property line to property line, which in this case, actually, let me switch this real quick because it's in metric. Okay, so when you're talking about right of way width, the city is talking about property line to property line. And it's a little unclear where the property line is because we don't have a survey. So a lot of people assume the property line is on the backside of the sidewalk, but in a lot of scenarios, it's actually past the sidewalk. So let's assume that the property line of this property is right here, and then probably the other property line's about here. So we got an 80-foot right of way. We got let's take a look at the street width here. Okay, so we got about 15 feet here from the sidewalk and the little grass area here. And in some scenarios, you're going to have landscaping planted over here. And then we got about 50 foot in width for the street. So 80 foot total, 15 feet for the sidewalks and the medians, and 50 foot wide street. Okay, so now let's go about the process that the city lays out right here. And let's figure if if a dedication is going to be required here. So the first thing they want us to do is they want us to identify the community plan, and we can do that by going into the zoning portal here, and this is going to pull up our zoning here. Of course, the city has a little contingency here that this information is not always correct, but we're going to trust that the city is providing us accurate information here. So here's my lot. It's zone CN15, and as soon as this populates, it should tell us what community plan controls this area. So bear with me here. This is a city website, so the performance is not always the best. I'm going to jump ahead, and I'm just going to open up the North Park Community Plan because I suspect this is going to be the North Park Community Plan. So here we go. North Park Community Plan. But I'm just going to confirm that as this opens here. Okay, so here we go. Community Plan, North Park. So I was correct that this is going to be the North Park Community Plan, which is right here. Okay, so we've completed step 1 here. We have determined, step 2. We have completed step 2. We've determined which community plan is for our lot example. Now, a community plan is a general recommendation to the city. It's not code, but in this context, the city is using this as the guiding document for the width of this right-of-way. Okay, now they want us to review the mobility elements of the community plan. Now, if I Google mobility here, we should be able to find the mobility element. This is in chapter 3. Now, an important criteria here is this North Park community plan is a recently updated community plan. So this has a mobility element, but the terminology is not consistent throughout all community plans. So even though this document is saying find the mobility element, a lot of community plans do not have a mobility element, which is going to make this difficult or impossible to determine. So let's get down to section 3 here so we can look at the mobility element. Here's section 2. Here is section 3. Okay, so they want us to determine the mobility element, and they want us to find the street classification figure with a future-oriented title prefaced with future, proposed, build-out, etc., and then identify the frontage street of interest, determine the future classification of that street, And if it's not identified in the figure, the roadway will be classified as a local street. Okay, so now we have to go through the mobility element of chapter 3 here. And here we have planned street classification. So this looks to be it. And this one is our existing functional street classifications. So we don't want to use the existing. We want to use the planned. And if we go over here, it is telling us that we're looking for future, proposed, build out. I guess planned is going to fall under the etc. category. So here we are planned. Okay, now I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to find my street. So I'm on Mead and 30th. So in this case, we're looking for 30th, which is this dotted pink line. And over here, it's called a two-lane collector continuous left turn lane. So that is the planned type of right-of-way that we have to consider when we're thinking about doing a development on this lot. Okay, so now that we know the planned street type, we're going to go down here. And I guess we're on step 4 now. Okay. So now it says, go to the street design manual, and we want to find the section that corresponds to our street classification, which is the two-lane collector with the continuous left turn lane. And then we want to identify the parkway options for the street classification. And a parkway is going to be this area on the side here, which I called the sidewalk previously, but the city calls this the parkway. And then we're going to review parkway configurations as applicable, and applicable figures and specifications depend on existing conditions, street trees, utilities, stormwater, BMP, separate traffic, separation from adjacent traffic, volume, speed, etc. Okay, so here we have our street design manual, and now we are going to be looking for the parkway options for the two-lane collector. And I'm just going to skip ahead here because I've actually already done this. I'm going to put this over here. This is not working for some reason. Okay. So here is the section in the street design manual that the city is recommending we go to. So let's just double check we've done this correctly. Find the sections that corresponds to your street classification. Okay, so we know here that we need to find the two-lane collector with the continuous left turn lane. So here we have a two-lane collector. This is a two-lane sub-collector, so that's not the one. So here we're at 1.5 all collector streets. So two-lane collector, sub-collector, two-lane collector. This seems to be one that is corresponding. Let's see what the next one is. Two-lane collector with two-way left turn lane, but this is continuous left turn lane, so that one doesn't work. And then here's a two-lane industrial collector, so that doesn't meet the criteria. And here we have a four-lane. Okay, so here's our first problem. Within the two-lane collectors, there's a few options. We have the standard two-lane collector. We have the two-lane collector with two-way left turn lane. And that's basically it. There's two options. Neither of those options meets the definition in the community plan. So at this point, you cannot continue and you cannot determine this answer. Now, the city's response to this is submit for a preliminary submittal. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But let's just plow through here, making some assumptions. Now, when you're dealing with a multi-million-dollar development project, you do not want to make assumptions. But in this scenario, for this podcast, we're just going to make some assumptions. Okay, so we're looking for two-lane collector, continuous left turn lane, two-lane collector with two-way left turn lane. I guess this would be the closest, even though the turn lane is not the same. Okay, so now we'll go back to the guide here, and we've basically found the selection that corresponds to our street as close as possible. Now we need to identify parkway options for the street classification. So to do that, we're going to go back to this document. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit, and I'm going to go down to the second page, and it should give us parkway options. So here it says we can use figure 5.6 through figure 5.9, and those are going to be our parkway options. So now we need to find those figures. So let's see where we can get that from. Okay, we'll sheet a little bit and we'll go right here to the link. Okay, so this document said that we could use 5.6 through 5.9. Oh, actually, there is more Parkway options here. So let's read through this together. So we have single dwelling residential, no front yards, low density multiple dwelling residential, no front yards, open park space. I don't think we fall into this category on 30th Street because there's a lot of commercial development. Over here, we have neighborhood commercial, community commercial. And if we go back to our zoning here, we can see that we are actually in, I believe this is commercial neighborhood. So neighborhood commercial. Okay, so we're going to be in this category here. So we're looking for now figure 5.6 through 5.9. And this is 5.5. Figure 5.5. Okay, here's the first of figure 5.6, Parkway. Here's 5.7, 5.8, and 5.9. So these are our Parkway options. But let's compare these Parkway options. Here's a 20-foot Parkway option. Here's a 20-foot Parkway option. Here's a 14-foot Parkway option. And here's a 14-foot Parkway option. So when you're looking to develop this, which Parkway option do we select? Because we have a 20-foot Parkway option, which does not fit over here. That would require a significant dedication. And we have a 14-foot option, which seems like it would fit perfectly. So let's defer back to this document and see which one it recommends we select. So review Parkway configure options in applicable figures, which we've done. Applicable figures and specifications depend on existing conditions, i.e. street trees, utilities, stormwater BMPs, separation from adjacent traffic, volume, and speed. Okay, so let's go back to these figures and let's see if we could determine what the difference is. Okay, so this option 5.6 is for tree grates, and we know we have those already on 30th Street. This is for tree grates within a transit area. So I suppose we can go back to the zoning here and we can see if we're in a transit area. So let's just double search that. Okay, we're in a transit priority area, but there is also other transit areas. Transit area overlaid. Yes. Okay, so maybe we're narrowing this down. Maybe we're in this 14-foot section here. Now this one is a 20-foot Parkway with tree grates where storefront furniture is provided. The clear pedestrian passage, et cetera, all street trees should conform. So we could be in this category. We're not able to determine that yet. Let's go down to this one here. Parkway in the transit area. Okay, so it seems like we've narrowed this down to either figure 9 or 5.9 or 5.7. But there's a 6-foot difference between these two. And there's no way that we can use this document to determine the difference. So let's plow through here and just keep going and see what happens. Determine if your parcel has superseding requirements. So they want us to search the address using the zoning and parcel portal to find if your parcel is in a community plan implementation overlay zone. Okay, so let's double check that. So we want to see if we're in that CPOS overlay zone. So I'm going to go through these overlay zones and I'm going to see if we are in that overlay zone. Not seeing it here. Let me keyword search this. CPIOZ. Okay, we are not in that overlay zone. So if I go back to the document here, we are not in this community plan and implementation overlay zone. So if so, supplemental, okay, we can ignore this because we're not there. If your project is proposing to use a complete communities housing solution, which we would not be in this specific example, so we could ignore this. So now we are down here. The project is subject to additional sidewalk or parkway requirements if the climate action, or let me read this again. The project is subject to additional sidewalk or parkway requirements if the climate action plan, in the climate action plan, if, okay, so certainly in this zone, we would trigger the climate action plan because we're probably going to be doing more than 3 dwelling units. We would do a non-residential development. But basically, I guess the conclusion that I find here is there's no way to determine if this would be a 14-foot parkway or if this would be a 20-foot parkway. And when you take a look at the overall development, that's the difference of basically 6 feet, which would mean a 3-foot dedication here and a 3-foot dedication here. So we cannot move forward here. Now, the city has an entire YouTube video on this. You could Google this, Urban Parkway Guidelines Presentation. And if you watch this video, they really try to walk you through this process. But the conclusion the city lands on is that you ultimately have to submit for a preliminary submittal, which now costs just under $1,500, so that the city can determine which parkway you would be subject to, and then you'd have to give them that lot. So you're paying the city so that the city can tell you how much of your lot you have to give up to them. So are you able to follow me on this, Bailey, or is this a little bit too much?
I struggle to follow you. I won't lie. But the thing that was going through my head as you were presenting all that is that, I mean, it just seems, there just seems to me to be no way that a homeowner exploring a major remodel, maybe a new home build, or wanting to build an ADU on their lot for passive income, which now basically anyone in San Diego who owns property could do. It seems like, one, I don't even know how they would come across needing to know they need to research this, but two, even if they did, the amount of technical steps required, I think there's just no way for them to actually break it down the way you just did. So basically it seems like kind of just like a trap down the line for their projects.
Yeah, I mean, if you're already $40,000 or $50,000 into your project here, are you going to say no when the city says you got to give me 2 feet of your property? There's 2 critical things I want to point out here, which I think are important to understand. This part of North Park in particular, we have recently been subject to a lot of the bike lane installations. So you can see them over here, these bike lanes and these little corner bump outs that the city has done. There is nowhere in the street design manual that references how to account for an additional width when you need to add a bike lane. So the bike lanes are kind of a newer thing. They have not been adopted into the street design manuals. So there could be additional width that the city is asking for to accommodate these bike lanes that is just completely undefined at the moment. The second thing I want to get into is how crazy, just how insane of a strategy this is to get a street to be wider. And let me break this down. Okay, let's say let's say we did need a dedication. And let's say the city ultimately would ask for a 3-foot dedication on this side and a 3-foot dedication on this side. They're only getting these dedications when people are applying for permits. So that means if I was to go through this project this year, I would dedicate some of this land here. But for the city to actually widen the street, just from here to here, they would have to wait for every single one of these property owners to apply for a permit, which means the real time that the city can take ownership of this land so they could widen the street, to add a bike lane, to add a little grassy area, or widen the sidewalk, or add another lane, or whatever they want to do. The real time has got to be over 200 years, because even in 200 years, I don't think every single person with a property fronting this street is going to apply for a permit. Do you understand how insane that is, Billy?
Yeah, that was one of the questions in my mind as you were presenting that, was how would this make sense? Because you would need to wait for everyone individually to do it. It seems like if you were going to do it, if you were really dedicated to widening the street, you would want to do it the eminent domain route of just telling people, hey, this is what's happening, deal with it. So yeah, I don't know. But it's a symptom of a larger trend, as we've talked about many times on this show.
Yeah, and I'll use this as a starting point for the example. But there's a lot of scenarios where there's properties that do not have sidewalks. And we propose a project that triggers public improvements. And the city says, now you need to install a sidewalk. So you could have an entire community with no sidewalks. And then my client, as part of our development, has to install a sidewalk from the left to right side of their property. So you basically have a sidewalk that goes nowhere. And again, it's going to take 200 plus years for that entire block to have a sidewalk. So the question that I'm wondering is, like, wouldn't it make more sense for for the city to use their resources to install a sidewalk along an entire street rather than having each property do a one-off of engineering, a one-off permitting, and a one-off of construction to install a single sidewalk that goes to nowhere in particular? I mean, the city, using the efficiency of scale, could do the engineering, do their own permitting, and do their own construction, and save the community like tens of thousands of dollars by just doing it themselves and using the efficiency of scale. But instead, the obligation to repair these things falls on the individual property owner at the time they're pulling a permit, which basically disincentivizes them from pulling a permit or creates a barrier for them to be getting the permit and doing these small developments. And going back to the beginning of this podcast, if I'm doing a discretionary permit, yeah, maybe it should be understood that there could be a dedication. But if I'm doing a small addition to a home, or if I'm doing a little ADU, it's unclear if these things trigger public improvements. Okay, let me give you one more example here, because this is something that recently came up on a project. I'll try to take a random block here. Okay, let's take this block here, just a random block in Adams North neighborhood. So as soon as this loads up here, I'll explain. Okay, let's see what the width of this alley is here. Okay, so this likely is an 18-foot alley. This is a substandard alley. The current standard for an alley is 20 feet. Now, let's say this person here, maybe this is their lot right here. Let's say they apply for a permit that triggers a dedication. So they have to dedicate 1 foot here, and then the other foot would be taken from this lot. But they already have a garage structure that's pre-conforming at the property line. So even if this property dedicates 1 foot, the city can never get a 20-foot alley here. So what happens in that scenario? Or what happens in this scenario where this property here, or let's take one where they don't have a zero lot line adjacency. Let's say this property here decides to build an ADU, single story, less than 16 foot. They can go with a zero lot line condition. So will the city allow you to build an ADU right up to this zero lot line like the municipal code says you're allowed, even though this is an alley that is a pre-conforming width? Because once you build that ADU, you can no longer get to the city standard. And I feel like this is just kind of like a major, just a major blind spot in the city's process to get these alleys up to these new widths. So you see the issue you'll run into here trying to propose a zero lot line condition with an ADU?
Definitely. And correct me if I'm wrong, of course, but I feel like it's the type of thing that sometimes even if your project would trigger this type of thing, sometimes it wouldn't even get caught. Other times it would. Like, it'd be applied very inconsistently, I imagine.
Totally. It depends on, it depends on like who's reviewing your project. So one reviewer may say, okay, you need the extra width that we saw in this document here. You need the 20-foot width. While another reviewer would just completely say, okay, no, 14 foot is fine. So it's like a roll of a dice, who you get reviewing your plans and what they're going to ask for here. And, I just kind of feel like the city has an obligation to be upfront about these types of things. And it's really unfair to the permit applicant to just throw these things or to convolute these things behind 100-page documents that only a professional is used to reviewing. And to be completely honest, like, these are documents, I've been working in the city for 15 years. These are documents I open very rarely. So this is not like, look at the length of this document. This is a 28-page document in this street design manual. This is the 10-page document in the street design manual. And this document, I had to request this specifically so I can understand this 6-page step. You cannot find this anywhere. Like, this is not part of the code. It's just hidden in the maze of DSD documents. And then, things change. This doesn't get updated. So it's just very complicated.
I think we both agree that it's unfair, the entire system, and overly burdensome. But if you had to steelman the case from the city's perspective, what would you say their argument is for something like this?
I'll play devil's advocate here. What the city wants to do, like the intent is good, like all these regulations, like the intent is generally good. So I wouldn't say there's some like grand conspiracy to like steal people's property. Like I don't think that's what's going on. I think you have kind of like um, design by committee, you could say. So you get one group that's compartmentalized and they're determining, okay, it would be better if all the alleys were 20 feet wide because that is now become like a new standard for fire truck access. They want 20 feet so they can get a fire truck down there. So that creates public safety. That's a good thing. Then on the other side, there's a big push to have walkable communities, which is also a very good idea. We want sidewalks that are shaded with trees. You need area to plant these trees. You need a sidewalk that meets ADA regulations so that people with disabilities can still enjoy the sidewalks and still, to the best of their ability, get from one place to another without cars. I will even go as far as saying I'm an advocate for bike lanes. I know that's been pretty controversial, which is actually kind of surprising. But the more cars we take off the road, the better. So I'm an advocate for the intent of these regulations. But then what happens is the way the city implements them, and that's where we always fall short. Like the intent is always good with the regulation, the implementation always falls short. So what should happen is the city should just create a unified document that's comprehensive that says these are the streets and these are the new standards. There shouldn't be, it could be A, it could be B, because any gray area like that adds cost and risk to all these projects, which means there's less likelihood that these projects actually get developed and built. So you don't want that. You want to encourage development. So what the city needs to do is they need to put together like a searchable PDF document that is readily available and advertised to the public to say, hey, before you submit for a permit, before you plan your project, you need to review this singular document, and that document can be hyperlinked back to these other street design manuals or Parkway manuals. And once you do that, there's no more questions, and then it's clear. And if you provide clarity, then I think that's the best thing we could hope for.
I agree. And I think this is just one of many things, landmines, if you will, people should be aware of as they're planning potential project. Like we've talked about on this show, there's the public improvements, for example, and then there's the EMRA thing, both of which I can link in the comments if people want to check it out and go deeper into that. But say people are, they want to move forward with their project, any type of project, whether it's, a new custom home, remodel, or one ADU or even multiple ADUs, and they're in the planning stages of their project. How do you think they should factor something like this along with all the other, pitfalls and landmines out there as they're researching their project before they speak to an architect like yourself?
Yeah, well, I don't think the average person would be able to do this. I think you basically have to engage a professional like myself, and then we could strategize what the best course of action is. So if you were proposing like right now I have a project where we're looking to do 6 ADUs, and I suspect that the city may be asking for an alley dedication because the current alley is 16 feet in width. So I think they're going to ask my client for a 2-foot dedication. So what we are going to do is we're going to plan in this room for error in the project. So we could shift the 6 ADUs so that we meet the dedication, but if the city does not request the dedication, we could shift them back to the location we actually want them. So there's 2 ways to go about this. I could either, from the onset of the project, submit a preliminary submittal, but that's going to cost my client $1,500. Or I could build in what I would expect to be a reasonable room for error so we could shift things around. And when you're designing high density, you don't always have 2 feet room for error. And in fact, on this project, really, we don't have 2 feet room for error. But to save the cost and the time of that preliminary submittal, we're basically making the project a little smaller than it could be, just to make sure we have kind of a plan B in case the city requires a dedication. Now, if you were to do a much larger project, especially something that would be a complete communities project or a mixed use project, maybe a commercial project on a major public road, and any discretionary project, then you want to submit for the preliminary submittal. That's a single disciplinary preliminary submittal for $1,500. They'll give you access to one department, and you can ask that single department up to 10 questions, which they will go on record for a 1 year period, which, by the way, 1 year period would expire by the time the permitting is completed. So by the time you're wrapping up the permitting, the city will no longer warranty their answers to those questions. If you submit for a multidisciplinary submittal, which is really the better option, the city has now limited those questions to only 10 questions, and that cost is $14,000 for 10 questions. So it's $1,400 per question. And I don't understand how that is justified, because that cost went up about 5 or 6 times what it was 3 years ago. Let me summarize it here. The answer to your question is the city has locked this behind a paywall. And it's my personal belief that this code should be freely accessible to anyone in the city or the state. But unfortunately, it's now locked behind a paywall.
It's unbelievable, honestly. Is there anything you would like to say to wrap up the conversation here in conclusion, whether it be about this or specifically how it ties into like the broader housing affordability crisis in San Diego?
I mean, I don't know where to start with this, but I'm going to continue to ask these types of questions to the city. I'm going to continue to track down these answers and then share them on my platforms. We are working on some documents that will help the public understand these things. We're right now working on a comprehensive list of website links that can share some of this information. And I guess I'll just continue to be a voice as an advocate for the public so that we can have free access to the codes that we have to use to build.
Got it. I think that's a good way to leave it. But before we wrap up, Sean, why don't you just let people know how exactly they can get in touch with you if they are considering a project despite some of these building challenges?
So a good starting point is our website, 1070architecture.com. You could check out our Instagram and other videos on this YouTube channel. Those links will be in the information below. And if you have a project that you want to work on, whether it's a single family home, an ADU, a series of ADUs, or commercial or multifamily project, get in touch with us. We'd love to help you.